Thanks so much for your time. I am Pius Kujobaka, and look now at our stories. And the country is currently racing against time to avert food crisis from next month due to the dry spell in northern part of Ghana. The development is expected to increase our import bill in the coming weeks as government works to deal with the expected grain shortfall. Now, government yesterday, you recall, announced the ban of export of some grains, including rice, corn and soybeans, to avert a drought-induced food shortage. And chairman of the Competitive African Rice Platform Ghana chapter, that's Yao Edupoku, joins me on phone for some quick conversation on this matter. Thanks so much, Yao, for joining us on Business Live. I want to understand how devastating has the dry spell been for rice farmers like yourself?
Thank you for giving me this opportunity, and good evening to your viewers. Rice, as we all know, is grown in the waters or mud, and so water is synonymous of rice growing. And so with the drought, what it means is that all the early planters are now stunted. The rice did not grow well, and so harvest will be very poor. This is the situation we find ourselves in.
And how significantly are the losses going to affect food supply, you would say?
Well, let's say about 40% of rice consumed is locally produced. So that 40% will be affected. And what it means is that it will create avenue for import. Already, the minister is talking about 100,000 metric tons of import coming in. So what it means is that the importers will have a field day, and the local scenario will be in the doldrums. We are going to suffer, but the distributors will have a field day because then they can still sell the foreign imported brand.
Again, what do you make of government's move to ban export of some grains to mitigate the situation we find ourselves in?
We've been through that scenario several times since the PFJ started, and it has not really worked. The good intentions of the government and the minister is thrown out when it gets to the field. So you go out there. Those who are exporting it, smuggling, it's not actually exported, they are not captured by the data collectors because they are not exporting through the well-known ports and gateways. They are exporting through the bushway, a truck at a time. And so you may have about, say, 1,000 metric tons leaving within a day from a particular district or area. And that is what is happening. And because the borders are porous, we cannot do anything to stop it from going. This is the situation we find ourselves in.
And
so the ban will not.
Conclude that for me.
So I don't think the ban will really have the effect it's supposed to have. I don't think so.
Well, the good thing, however, is that government has spoken to some financial institutions to support farmers. I guess this should be satisfying for you.
We are yet to see that.
But are you optimistic?
It's really the financial institutions will buy into the government. I am not. Totally not.
Why?
Because you hear it, but when you go down there, you won't see the money. And it's not the first time. That is why noble ideas like the PFJ1, PFJ2 does not really felt where it should. Because at this stage, if the PFJ1 has worked, like we won't even be bothered about this, what do we call it, drought, because we would have addressed it before it even happened. And the PFJ2 is on board and it's running. But we are now going to import, and we are telling the financial institutions to go in there. You mark my words, Same time next year, we'll tell you it was a flop. They won't do it, period. They won't do it. It's just rhetoric.
Yao Poku, thanks so much for your time. He's the chairman Competitive African Rice Platform speaking to us on that developing story. And of course, I want to bring in as well an economist, Professor William Ba Boateng, for some quick analysis on that as well. Thanks so much, Professor Boateng, for agreeing to speak to us on Business Live. Now, for you, how much is this move taken by government to ban the export of grains going to affect our export earnings and, of course, the economy as a whole?
Well, thank you very much. This is a situation, and in trying to resolve it, you have to look at the impact on the entire economy. And of course, you cannot also forget about the farmers who also have to count their costs and so on. Now, if you look at the farmers' perspective, the less that they were able to salvage, they may want to sell them at a price that will get them reduce their cost. And selling them could be selling them outside the country in terms of export or selling them within. But from a government perspective, for the purpose of ensuring that we don't, we get at least food security, we get something that we eat locally, the government has also taken that action. I think the middle way would be that if government's decision to ban farmers from exporting the risk that they have, I think government can also come up with some strategies to also be able to meet those farmers halfway, so that at least the effect will not be trying to solve one problem and then creating another challenge on the other hand.
I'll get to you to tell me what some strategies you may like to proffer to government. But in the meantime, some have argued that the decision taken now is a necessary evil to avert the looming threat of food insecurity. But how do we make up for the shortfall when it comes to the export of grains?
Well, this is a shock that has come in. We are supposed to have food to feed the people. So if we have this challenge and harvest is going to be low and not be able to have enough to feed ourselves, we need to import. So there's going to be importation of grains, of importation of rice and so on. And the effect will be on a bit of pressure on our forests. That one, we cannot run away from that. And we should also know that the exports that we have gotten from the grains, the little that we export, we also not get that. So by and large, it's going to have a bit of pressure on our forex market. So we cannot run away from that. The other one is that we're trying to tame inflation. And now 20.9% as of last month was something all of us were thinking that we'll be able to bring it to the team. And this may also jeopardize our efforts in bringing inflation. So the strategy here will be all about trying to bring our shoulders to the wheel. Government will then have to recalibrate its expenditure, try to make sure that some unproductive expenditure that government will embark on, especially this election year, government has to take a second look at it and make sure that all expenditure is focused on more productive parts of activity so that we'll be able to reduce the impact of this shock.
Finally, before you go, sir, how do we tackle this issue when it comes to dry spell, etc., so that we wouldn't sacrifice the export of commodities just to contain situations like these? And of course, you heard the rice farmer, Yao Poku, say that, well, doesn't believe in government's intervention policies like, financial support to them.
Well, I didn't hear Yao Poku, but I am a village boy. I grew up in the village. I grew up in an area where we have irrigation. When I go to my hometown and see that the dams there, the machines are rotten, and there's no farming activity there. We used to have tomatoes throughout the year. That is why that place became the hub of tomatoes. We can even extend it to maize and so on. We have the dam, but the machines have been left rotten. I sometimes find it difficult to understand why we cannot invest in irrigation, especially the northern part of Ghana, to be able to ensure all year-round farming. And we wait till the catastrophe happens and then we begin to throw our hands in the air. I think it should be a lesson to government and to all of us. I think if we want to develop as a country, we cannot ignore agriculture and be able to make agriculture the backbone of the country. We have to have a all year farming activity. We can do that with irrigation all over the place. And I think government should take this as a lesson and make sure that we take irrigation seriously. So even if the rain does not come, we'll be able to water our crops and will not have this kind of challenge again.
Very well. Thank you so much, Professor William Boateng, for speaking to us on Business Life. We appreciate your thoughts, sir. Away from this topic to some other stories we are following up for you, presidential candidates of the two leading political parties, the New Patriotic Party and, of course, the National Democratic Congress, have all laid out their plans to remove some taxes and levies. That is if they win the elections in December and form the next government. But is the economy in its current state ready for these actions? Let's get onto Zoom and speak to tax consultant Francis Timoboy. Francis, thanks so much for joining us on Business Life and good to see you. Now, what is your own assessment of the tax proposals made by the flag bearers of the two major political parties? We are looking at Dr. Bawumia pledging a flat rate at the port and, of course, VAT, and also John Mahame's proposal to reduce taxes at the port. Do you think these taxes have implications on revenue?
So, Pius, thanks for having me. If you look at the two manifestos, you realize that both aim at stimulating economic growth through the use of taxation. And indeed, you look at what they have proposed, it tells you that they all admit that there's a problem with the tax system. And so there's the need to revise or make some changes to it. For example, look at the VAT that was introduced in 2018. Dr. Bawumia said he will change it to the old system. And I think Mahama has also said the same thing. Again, they are also targeting e-levy, and they are also saying that they will abolish it. So clearly, it tells you that we have a problem with the current tax system. But overall, I think that what both failed to tell us is whether they're going to introduce new taxes. What we see is trying to offer some tax relief and tax exemption. And I think that if we do not find an alternative to replace the revenue that we are losing, there's that potential that some of the proposals may not come to pass. Dr. Bawumia has promised to grant some tax amnesty. Yes, that is good. But if we do not, follow up with comprehensive compliance measures, it's not going to succeed. Flat rates will make the whole system very simplified, which we are all looking at for. But if we do that and we are not careful in the calibration of it, you realize that we're not going to get the revenue that is needed. Remember, 2026, 2027, we are resuming the debt servicing. So whilst we are promising and trying to stimulate the economy with tax reliefs and exemption, the question then is, where is the alternative going to come from? It's something that we need to know.
Now, talking about the scrapping of e-levy and, of course, the COVID levy and the betting tax, there are some wondering whether that will affect revenue targets, especially when we are under an IMF program.
Of course, it will, because COVID-19 alone brings, I think 2025, we're expecting about 6 billion Ghana cedis. E-levy is going to give us around 2.5 billion cedis. If you scrap them, we must have an alternative. So certainly some of the policies are going to conflict with the IMF policy. Remember, IMF, their problem is that we are not collecting enough compared to the size of our GDP. Currently, we are around 14%, and our neighbors are doing 32%. So what is it that you have with your tax system? And that's why they always complain when we give tax exemptions to big multinationals. So clearly, if the policies as they have outlined, I agree that we need to revise our tax system. But whilst we are granting the reliefs and exemptions to stimulate the economy, we have a huge debt ahead of us, servicing the interest payment that has been suspended. So if we are not told whether we are going to get some additional money from somewhere, then it's going to be a little problem. the administration of the tax system, where I think in the NDC policy, we're told that they want to expand the tax net. And Dr. Bamiao has also said the same thing. We need to see how these policies can be rolled out in order to bring more taxpayers into the net, to collect more. Other than that, the amnesty, the flat rate, and all those things is going to have a deep hole in government revenue, and servicing of the debt becomes a problem.
Thank you so much, Francis, for your input this very moment. We appreciate it. You're still watching Business Live here with me, Pius Kojo Baka. We are back with more. Please stay. Welcome back to Business Live. Accounting firm PwC has joined calls for policy reforms which will simplify the country's tax administration. According to country's senior partner at PwC, Visha Shangbo, the current tax structure makes it difficult for businesses and, of course, individuals to comply. Speaking at the PwC's Banking Customer Experience Breakfast Forum, he called for clarity on some tax laws to make its transparent or interpretation easy and transparent.
From PwC, we do believe that there's a need for our tax landscape in Ghana to be, let's use the word rationalized. When I say rationalized, I'm not suggesting that taxation should necessarily be reduced. What we're saying is that the way it's structured needs to be rationalized. It should be made simpler, more transparent, and easier to administer. So for us, we think these are the issues. We clearly have a challenge with revenue as a whole. So we are advocates of increasing domestic revenue by broadening the tax net. And we do believe that one of the ways we can achieve that, interestingly enough, is to simplify the environment and also allow for more certainty in how some of the tax laws and regulations are interpreted, so that businesses can see what they are due to pay. And, you know, most businesses actually are not averse to paying taxes. All people or businesses are looking forward to is clarity, transparency, and fairness in terms of the administration of the tax environment. So we support the rationalization of the tax system to make it simple, transparent, easy to understand, so that people can comply with the obligations without too much hassle.
For headline stories, the Minister of Finance, Dr. Mohamed Amin Adam, has called for a revamp of the economic metrics used to assess the creditworthiness of African countries in the international financial market. He argues that the current metrics do not adequately reflect key aspects unique to the continent's growth and development trajectory. Dr. Adam made these remarks at the Future Energy Conference here in Accra.
Africa has capacity to borrow to finance our development, but we borrow at substantially higher interest, which in some cases triples the rate of borrowing in the developed world. In addition to this, the economic metrics used to determine our creditworthiness is not really reflecting the situation in Africa. We have huge solar potential, which is not factored into the economic metrics, particularly into the computation of the gross domestic product. We have huge natural capital assets, which are not factored into the metric for determining our credit worthiness. And we have a huge uncultivated arable land across our continent, which are not factored into the measurement of our gross domestic product. And therefore, if Africa is to harness all this potential as tool for leveraging global funding, that it is imperative that the international financial architecture is reformed. The current state in which it is does not support Africa's development and will not support Africa's development if it continues to stay this way.
Policy think tank Africa Center for Entrepreneurship and Youth Empowerment, ACE, is calling for reforms in the entrepreneurial ecosystem. At the launch of its 2024 Regional Entrepreneurship Freedom Index report, Savannah region was identified as a moderately free and relatively supportive environment for business and entrepreneurial activities. There is more in this report. The 2024 Regional Entrepreneurship Freedom Index report focused on regional disparities and ways by which entrepreneurship freedom can be strengthened. In all, 14 indicators were used to assess the level of entrepreneurial freedom in all the 16 regions, including trade, labor, regulation, financial and market freedom. Chief Executive of the Africa Center for Entrepreneurship and Youth Empowerment, Emmanuel Akwa, said there is the need for deliberate changes in the entrepreneurial ecosystem to help businesses operate freely.
So when you're asking for real reforms, we are saying that, look, instead of just scratching the surface and, of course, going about partisan lines and being on the lookout for personal interest, there has to be a holistic view as to how we approach the issues of entrepreneurship. Cash transfer programs, we have been doing it for years. The same, problem or the same projects that we come up with, just that we rebrand, the politicians rebrand them and give them different names. But what has been the impact of these projects? Now, can we assess the impacts of these projects as against the problems that these projects have caused? Then if we are embarking on all these projects and we are not seeing real growth, we are not experiencing economic growth, the prosperity level is on the decline, then clearly it should tell us that there is something fundamentally wrong.
He also called for the centralization of regulatory bodies to enhance the registration processes for small businesses.
If we reform the Office of the Registrar General's, the Office of the Registrar of Company, where there is synergy between the Office of the Registrar of Companies and the other institutions or mandated institutions to also issue lines and all that. If that place, there is that synergy, there is that harmony, where let's say a startup is able to get a tax holiday right at a go on the certificate. This is something that tends to benefit every single body. It might not be at that moment, but anytime anybody wants to embark on an entrepreneurial activity, it would be so easy for that person to benefit from those rewards.
Savannah region emerged as a moderately free area with a conducive environment for economic growth. That's it for Business Live. I am Pius Kojo Bakari.